Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be both a continuation of a previous lesson as well as a second draft of a former lesson. The range we're going to be covering is from the third chapter in the book of Proverbs. We're going to be taking it from 18 to 35. We recently redid the earlier section of this. The third chapter of Proverbs was the earliest one that we did. You can type in the same name minus the second draft in the YouTube search engine just to have a reference for the fact that extemporaneous exegeses are not a natural, does not come naturally to me. I had to teach myself to do it through the process of time, but I have gotten better and more effective. So we're going to do this section justice in ways we did not. The content is sound, but the delivery is flawed. We're just going to briefly review what we recently covered in the third chapter. Now, one of the things I made mention of in that chapter is that there are conditions. First off, the third chapter continues the trajectory of the second chapter. The theme of the second chapter is the moral benefits of wisdom. The third chapter lays out additional benefits of wisdom, but there are conditions to be met and satisfied to receive God's guidance and God's blessing. And I actually in the lesson I most recently did, I identified 4 of them, but after careful reconsideration, there is in fact 5. So the earliest one is in the first 2 verses: length of days and long life and peace they shall add to you. But the condition is laid out in the first verse: do not forget my Torah and let your heart watch over my command. So if you want lengths of day and long life, you have to honor, obey, read, heed, study, and live the Torah and obey the commandments. And then the second one is let not kindness and truth forsake you, bind them around your neck. The binding around the neck is going to come up in the early in the section we're going to cover itself. But then you will find favor, grace, and good insight in the eyes of Elohim and man. So the condition you have to satisfy is to don't abandon kindness and truth. Live it with longevity and make it a part of you, so it will become ingratiated with you. It will be so internally bound that it will exude on your exterior. And then the third and most famous, the blessing is alluded to in the 8th verse, healing and moistening, but there are 3 conditions: trust in Yahweh with all your heart, acknowledge him in all your ways, and do not be wise in your own eyes. And these are just the first halves of the verses 5 through 7, and we do cover them in greater detail. But the rejuvenation and the restoration of health is predicated and conditioned upon these conditions being satisfied. And the fourth one is to tithe. If you want to receive back multiple of what you tithe, you have to tithe. Then your storehouses shall be filled with plenty, and your vats overflow with new wine. So you're not going to even have room enough to store the return rate of that which you initially invested with the tithing. And this is communicated also in Malachi 3:10. And then don't despise the discipline of Yahweh, and do not loathe his reproof, for whom Yahweh loves he reproves, as a father the son whom he delights. Blessed is the man who has found wisdom, and the man who gets understanding. So in order to find wisdom and gain understanding, you have to accept and embrace discipline, and the approach and the attitude towards discipline separates the foolish from the wise, the righteous and the wicked. The foolish and the wicked, all they can think about is the initial pain. There is nothing immediately gratifying about discipline, but the wise and the righteous will embrace it and make the most of it and assess and unlock its educational and remedial potential. And then verses 13 through 18 begin and end in the word blessed, and he just compares wisdom to something beyond any earthly treasure, any measure, any quantifiable calculation is more precious than gold, rubies. All your delights are not comparable to her. So all the pleasures of the earth, all the carnal satisfactions of the world is as naught compared to possessing in wisdom. Length of days is another, it may not add years to your life, but it will add life to your years. And her ways are pleasant, they are peaceful. All her paths are peace. So you will not be hindered by confusion or doubt or inner turmoil or external turmoil if you watch. And it is a tree of life, so it is a life not only unto itself, but also provides life for those who attach it. 19th verse, 3rd chapter of Proverbs, lesson itself. Yahweh founded the earth by wisdom. He established the heaven by understanding. So the relationship of wisdom in the creation is expounded more elaborately in the 8th chapter, the 22nd through the 31st verse, but it is compared to the foundation of the earth. The creation process is compared to a building project. When you lay a building, the first and fundamental facet is the foundation. That's what holds it all together. So there is similarly a foundation of the earth which is known only to him. And to establish the heavens, it requires understanding and intelligence. All this universe is the product of an intelligent design. To argue otherwise is a confession of lack of intelligence, because the laws of physics are ordained by him. And so it was an act of wisdom. The existence of creation implies that there was a creator who was powerful enough, wise enough to execute it. That's the attribute of omniscience, unlimited or infinite intelligence. Powerful enough to execute it. That's the attribute of omnipotence, unlimited or infinite strength. And is able to be everywhere all the time, all at once. That is the attribute of omnipresence, which is the ability to be everywhere and anywhere at once. So when we look at creation, we have to look for the creator. By his knowledge, the depths were broken up, and clouds dropped down dew. So the depths is another way of saying the sea, and they were broken up. This was an act of knowledge and wisdom and intelligence to him. It is beyond our capacities to even conceive or design of a universe as, the universe is imperfect, but we make it imperfect. Sin, all of creation groans in longing for redemption, Paul writes in the 8th chapter of the book of Romans, verses 19 through 22. But the clouds that drop dew, that's the rain, which enables the agricultural output. So without the rain, we could not survive, because we would have no irrigation for our crops or anything. But there are ways of artificial irrigation. But without rain, life on Earth as we know it would cease to exist. It would destroy the entire food chain. My son, let them not depart from your eyes. Watch over sound wisdom and discretion. So the same thing he says about truth and kindness earlier. He says the same thing. Do not forsake it. Do not forget it. Do not leave it. Do not depart from it. Keep your eyes fixated on them. If you get distracted from them, then eventually you're going to depart from it. So it demands labored attention and diligent observance and practices. And to watch over, that means looking at it, researching it. Keep your nose in the Bible, keep your knees on the floor in prayer, and you will be well. And wisdom, discretion is a component of wisdom, but far from the fullness thereof. Discretion, understanding will keep you, discretion will preserve you. Paraphrase from the 2nd chapter. Then they become life to your soul and adorning to your neck. So they become life. We already read that in the Tree of Life, verse 18. And the adorning on your neck, that's the third verse. So the neck, your soul is something internal. So if you internally feed, if your soul becomes defined by wisdom, then it will exude on the exterior. But it all starts in the soul, and then it will be obvious to others. You know, we can. The purpose of wisdom is not to impress the world with the knowledge at our disposal, but to, sometimes a prudent man concealeth knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaimeth foolish. So sometimes it is wise. That's where the virtue of discretion enters. We should not cast our pearls before swine, because what are they going to do with it? Matthew 7:6, New Testament. Then you will walk safely in your ways, and your foot would not stumble. So the word then is indicative of the chain of conditions and promised blessings, or blessings and guidance. So the guidance is here. The blessing is of guidance. You will walk safely in your way. You will not stumble over the obstacles that are put in your path. The way the covenantal way and the straight and narrow path to salvation is straight and narrow, but there are detours, there are side bumps, there are rocks in the road, there are hindrances, there are obstacles, there are temptations literally around the straight and narrow road. But if we hold fast and hold tight to wisdom, then we will not stumble, we will not fall, we will walk one move forward and upward. So forward is the straight and narrow path, which eventually leads to salvation in heaven. When you lie down, you need not be afraid, and you shall lie down, and your sleep shall be sweet. This echoes some of the covenantal promises as outlined in Leviticus 26, whereas if they are wicked in disobedience, they will flee when none pursueth, and this is also communicated in Proverbs 28:1. So you have no need to fear. When you fear Yahweh, that is the foundation of wisdom, as made plain in 1:7, also 9:10 and 15:33. You will not be governed by irrational fears. So the fear of Yahweh is the fear which eliminates and expunges all other fears. So we have to be afraid of what he can do to us. You know, we want to love. A mature believer's sense of love will exceed their sense of faith, but fear is where we all began. We don't want to lose the fear of his awesome power and might, what he can do with us. We want to fear the fact that we can depart from the straight and narrow and forfeit our salvation, but we don't want to be afraid of men or those who can harm the body. Our main fear should be the one who can send us to eternal torment. And we will get sound sleep. We will not be up at the night. We will not be anxiety. One of the causes and effects and consequences of anxiety is restlessness and sleeplessness. So that we won't have to worry about that if we hold fast and tight and cling to the path of wisdom in her ways. Do not be afraid of sudden dread, nor the ruin of the wicked when it comes. So the ruin of the wicked is prophesied and foretold by wisdom herself in the range of the 20th to, I think, the 26th verse of the first chapter. And wisdom is personified as a female form, and it is divine because it is capital letters. So it is a component of God, but far from the fullness. And we don't want to get in the mind maze of gender because Yahweh is an invisible entity without any sexual organs. We do anthropomorphize him as a male, our heavenly Father, but he also has maternal qualities that the prophet Isaiah points out, and a few other places. But to return to the passage itself, the ruin of the wicked, it may not come suddenly, but it will come eventually, and inevitably they will reap what they sow. And the wickedness by its very nature is self-destructive. So those who lay traps for others will eventually be ensnared by the very traps. Their designs will be thwarted upon themselves, and they will fall prey to the traps and the snares that they laid for others. For Yahweh is at your side, and he shall keep your foot from being caught. So with a powerful ally and friend like Yahweh on our side, we are made invincible through his omnipotence. So, we're not going to be caught. We're not going to be trapped in the ways of the world and sin and temptation when he is at our side. In order to keep him at our side, we have to keep him in constant communion through repeated and daily prayer. So the Yahweh, there's nothing automatic or unconditional about having him on our side. There are certain prerequisites we need to satisfy and meet in order to assure us of his presence and his protection. There is no shortcuts to any of this stuff that is outlined in this book. Do not withhold good from those who deserve it, when it is in the power of your hand to do so. So this principle is communicated in the New Testament by John the Baptist in Luke 3:11. He says, if you have two coats, give one to one who has nothing. And, everyone deserves a coat because nakedness without clothes, it is a survival issue. And also in James 2:15-16, it ties into, proving your faith through works. So the Proverbs and the Bible itself should not, interpretation must lead to application. So it's one thing to interpret this statement, it is self-evident, but it is another thing to apply it. And, even encountering one of the most frequent tests for our charitable natures is encountering homeless people on the street. And, you can justify it in a million ways. You can, assume that they're going to send it on drugs or alcohol, but they've had a rough life. They deserve the spare change in your pocket. So always be ready to meet them whenever you go outside the door, because it is in your power to give them they are needy, and you have what they need. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come back, and tomorrow I will give it, when you have it with you. This is more attuned to what James communicates in the earlier allude to passage from his book, the second chapter, verses 15 and 16. So excuses, there's immediate urgency to need and necessity and want that cannot be delayed, should not be stalled, or you can invent 1,000 and million one excuses, but to appropriate the wisdom of our own Benjamin Franklin, he who is good for making excuses is seldom good at anything else. So when the opportunity presents itself, you can't procrastinate at the opportunity. You got to make the most of it, recognize it, and run with it, and take it to the level that is required of us. Do not plan evil against your neighbor, seeing he dwells safely beside you. So neighborly love is a trait, and if you lack neighborly love, you will plot evil against your neighbor. But neighbors, you don't have to live with them, but you have to live next to them, and that's the closest thing to living with them. So there are definite do's and don'ts for neighborly conduct, and plotting evil and planning evil against them, devising their destruction or conspiring against them for their downfall, their devastation, or ruin is clearly in the don't category. But make sure he is safe in his home and his possessions, and he is secure therein while he lives next to you. Make him feel welcome. It is a neighborhood, and in order for a neighborhood to flourish and function, we have to have neighborly love in order for our communities to realize their divinely intended potential. Do not strive with a man without cause, if he has done you no evil. So conflict and confrontation and arguments all start somewhere. He says there is no reason to be the provocateur. It is okay to argue when you are the offended or aggrieved party, but you should not preemptive attacks. There's no reason, no cause. There's no reason to bring unnecessary drama in your lives or the lives of others. So just, the temptation is there, but don't do it. Make sure you have a cause, a just one, and a legitimate one, and a justifiable one, if you do, in fact, have to strive with your neighbor. So this passage isn't communicating that you should not strive with a man altogether, only without cause. So the worthiness of your striving is solely determined by the cause or the reason or the rationale behind it. But if he has, do no evil to those who do no evil to you, and evil, just like confrontation, all starts somewhere, and so too does love. So as neighbors, if love has to start somewhere, why not with you? Be the one to reach out to one who is just looks lonely, lost, or anything else. For the perverse one is an abomination to Yahweh, and his secret counsel is with the straight. So the word abomination is used to express that which is a detestable abhorrence to Yahweh. And in the 6th chapter, we read of the 7 abominations. There are many more throughout these scriptures. But if you are perverse in language or your thoughts or your actions or your deeds or your nature or characters, you are an abomination to Yahweh. But if you are straight, upright, righteous, have integrity and faith, then you will unlock the mysteries of his wisdom, which are otherwise unknowable. The secret, the mysterious revelation, you have to be straight in order to unlock it. So there is always a condition to meet. There's nothing automatic. We are not entitled to his secret counsel. We have to satisfy our end of the bargain in order to unlock and unleash his wisdom and his secret counsel. The curse of Yahweh is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the righteous. So it's not uncommon to be the only Christian home in a post-Christian culture, and but his blessings will be upon us. Even so, don't injure your neighbor. You have to. It's an act of faith to just let the wicked, that's his business, his right, his prerogative, Yahweh's, that is, he's the his, to judge and curse Yahweh. But we should just let it be. If they are wicked, we have to accept by faith. So it is tempting to wait on his perfect justice, and the problem is oftentimes we want to intervene and force the righting of wrongs prematurely to his purpose, and that only gets in the way. But just stay blessed, stay righteous, and your home will be blessed, your family will be blessed, everything you have and everything you do will be blessed. He certainly scoffs the scoffers, but gives grace to the humble. So scoffers, he gives them a taste of their own medicine. A scoffer is one who treats what is significant trivially, and also treats what is trivial significantly. That's also a snowflake, one who takes unnecessary offense. It's just a sign of weakness. But scoffers are more akin to the earlier half of the formula. They treat they laugh and scoff at things. You tell them that they're lost in sin and they're doomed to hell, and they'll scoff it away. And some of the scoffers we have to live with in our generation are alluded to by Peter, the ones in the 3rd chapter of his 2nd epistle, the ones who say that the second coming is not going to happen because it hasn't happened yet. But, scoffers, they will receive a bitter taste of their own medicine in the final day and in the ultimate judgment. But grace is the unmerited favor, but it is an oversimplification to suggest that his grace can extend to the unrepentant and wicked or the proud, but it is, in fact, belongs to the humble, and humble people in and of themselves do not deserve his grace, his salvation. It is by grace that we are saved, but he will exalt the humble and debase the proud. The wise inherit esteem, but fools are bearing away shame. So this is an antithetical juxtaposition, and there are one of two ways that Proverbs are primarily arranged. There is an antithetical where it compares and contrasts two outlooks, and they have different outcomes produced by the outlooks. And then on glance, the dead giveaways are the word but, that indicates an antithetical juxtaposition, and which indicates a completion of sentence. So upon review, all these are ands, but we finally read a but here, first one in this lesson. So the wise, the esteem and honor and praise and adulation belongs to them, and it is something they inherit. But fools, they can only expect shame, because once foolishness is exposed, you have every right to be embarrassed and ashamed by it. So we want to avoid that predicament, and I hope that's one of the reasons you're here. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to see you. Take care until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.